The story begins by showing a bustling city with a grand mall standing tall in its heart. However, tragedy struck one fateful day as the mall collapsed, claiming the lives of 48 people. Among the victims were two sisters, Moon-soo and Hyun-soo, who happened to be inside the mall at that very moment. Sadly, Hyun-soo lost her life in the calamity. Years passed, and the haunting sadness of that incident continued to linger in the hearts of Moon-soo and her family. Moon-soo's mother, Yoon-ok, couldn't come to terms with the loss of her beloved second daughter, who had once been a famous child actress. Today, their lives had changed drastically. They now lived modestly, with Yoon-ok managing a small salon, the sole remaining family asset. Moon-soo often lent a hand, assisting her mother in running the salon. Though Moon-soo didn't possess the same enchanting beauty as her late sister, she was known for her intelligence and had recently been accepted into an architecture program at a renowned construction company led by the talented architect Seo Joo-won. In the meantime, another survivor of the mall collapse, a young man named Lee Kang-doo, was trying to make a life for himself and his younger sister, Lee Jae-young. Sadly, their father, Dong-yong, lost his life in the tragic incident. To support themselves, Kang-doo took up odd jobs, ranging from working as a porter in the market to serving as a hired muscle for a nightclub owner, dealing with unruly patrons. On a particular day, after standing up to Jung Yoo-tak, one of the influential figures at Siwon Construction Company, for his rude behavior towards a woman at the bar, Kang-doo accidentally crossed paths with Joo-won. Joo-won attempted to confront Kang-doo, assuming he was impersonating someone to gain entry into the office. Unfazed by the misunderstanding, Kang-doo simply decided to leave. Shortly afterward, Kang-doo found himself encountering Moon-soo, who, like him, preferred taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Ever since the mall collapse, both of them felt uneasy in confined and dimly lit spaces. As they climbed the stairs, Moon-soo appeared exhausted, nearly losing her balance. Sensing her struggle, Kang-doo rushed to her aid. When they finally reached their destination floor, Moon-soo seemed completely worn out. Nevertheless, she managed to deliver the documents that Joo-won, her supervisor, required. Witnessing Moon-soo's dedication, Joo-won felt compelled to express his gratitude and apologize for the earlier incident. On a rainy evening, as they traveled back home from work, Joo-won offered Moon-soo a ride. During the journey, he revealed that one of the reasons he had hired her was because her work reminded him of his own youthful passion and talent. Meanwhile, Kang-doo finds himself seeking the assistance of Marie, the woman who owns the bar and has become like an older sister to him. He asks her for help in securing a job as a manual laborer at the Siwon Company project. After visiting Mary's place, where he feels a sense of comfort and familial bond, Kang-doo encounters Jung Soo-ki, the kind-hearted owner of a traditional medicine shop whom he regards as his grandmother figure. On the other hand, the pain of Hyun-soo's departure continues to haunt Yoon-ok, who blames herself for the tragedy. Moon-soo, burdened by guilt over her sister's death, frequently commemorates Hyun-soo's birthday, keeping her memory alive. Sometime later, Moon-soo pays a visit to her father's tavern. Dong-chul, who had separated from Yoon-ok due to their strained relationship following Hyun-soo's demise, runs the establishment. On her way back home, Moon-soo stumbles upon a battered Kang-doo by the roadside. Concerned for his well-being, she helps him and brings him to Dong-chul's house for medical treatment. The following day, Kang-doo wakes up, startled to find himself at Dong-chul's house. He expresses his gratitude before bidding farewell. On his way home, Kang-doo comes across Jae-young, his younger sister, who intends to return the money he gave her. She's annoyed with Kang-doo for prioritizing her needs over his own, even to the extent of enduring physical harm just to earn some money for her. Later that evening, Yoo-tak and Joo-won are seen having dinner together at home. They had become stepbrothers since Joo-won's mother, Ki-ae, married Yoo-tak's father after the tragic mall collapse that claimed Joo-won's father's life. Joo-won continues to carry a heavy burden as his late father, an architect, was considered one of the key figures responsible for the collapse of the massive mall 10 years ago. The following morning, with Mary's assistance, Kang-doo finally secures a job at the Siwon Company project. He becomes the caretaker of a building construction site, the very place where his father lost his life in the mall collapse. While during a team meeting, the newly appointed Moon-soo discovers that their next project will take place at the site of the mall collapse, stirring up painful memories of her sister's tragic death. A decade ago, Moon-soo had accompanied her sister Hyun-soo for a photo shoot at the mall. Meanwhile, Kang-doo, waiting for his father who worked at the mall, noticed Moon-soo getting ready to meet her senior, Choi Sung-jae, at an ice cream parlor. However, their lives took an unexpected turn when the mall suddenly crumbled, leaving them trapped. Kang-do suffered a severe leg injury that shattered his dream of becoming a footballer. In the present, as night descends and the construction workers leave for the day, Kang-do channels his anger towards the tragedy by vandalizing a monument that stands as a symbol of condolences for all the victims of the mall collapse. On another day, Moon-soo decides to help her mother, Yoon-ok, at the salon instead of going into the office, hoping to avoid the survey at the Seowon project site. However, Ju-won picks her up and insists she accompanies him. During their journey, Ju-won notices Moon-soo's discomfort regarding the construction project at the mall collapse site. He had overheard her discussing the tragedy with her friends. Ju-won reveals that he, too, shares the same uneasiness because his father, burdened with guilt over the incident, made a fateful choice. Upon reaching the location, Moon-soo becomes overwhelmed with fear as memories of her sister, Yeon-soo, resurface. Ju-won focuses on conducting the survey, glancing at the now-destroyed memorial for the victims. However, Yang-chul, the on-duty field foreman, remains oblivious to the person responsible for the monument's destruction. Meanwhile, Kang-do is seen visiting Dong-chul's tavern, hoping to find the woman who assisted him previously. However, Dong-chul purposely withholds information, concerned that Kang-do, who gives off a delinquent impression, might approach his daughter. Back at his residence, Kang-do receives kind treatment from his landlord, Yo In-suk, who lives with her mentally challenged son, Sang-man. Later that night, Ju-won remains intrigued by the vandal who destroyed the monument and requests Yang-chul to provide the data of the new security personnel. Although Yang-chul doesn't suspect Kang-do, who may seem unintelligent, Ju-won still insists on obtaining information about Kang-do, recalling their previous encounter where Kang-do displayed arrogance. The following day at the office, as Moon-soo submits her field survey report for the Seowon project, Ju-won expresses concern and offers her the option to handle a different project if she feels uncomfortable. However, Moon-soo assures him that she is determined to see the project through to completion. At the airport, Jung Yoo-jin, a director at Seowon Construction Company, returns to Korea to assist her father in managing the company. She encounters Ju-won, whom they were once a couple before their parents got married. Yoo-jin still seems to have lingering feelings for him, while Ju-won, on the other hand, harbors no regrets about their separation. His deepest regret lies in the way Ki-ae, his stepfather's wife, is treated more like a maid than a valued member of the family. Later that night, Kang-do is having a meal at Dong-chul's tavern when he finally discovers that the woman who helped him the other day is Dong-chul's daughter, who happens to be working at the tavern. After Moon-soo leaves, Kang-do decides to follow her to express his gratitude. Along the way, he witnesses Moon-soo almost getting hit by a food delivery motorcyclist and quickly steps in to ensure her safety. After making sure Moon-soo and the motorcyclist are all right, Kang-do departs, leaving Moon-soo surprised by his unexpected actions. In another instance at the office, Ju-won tries to calm down Moon-soo, who feels anxious about taking the elevator. He accompanies her as she chooses to use the stairs after their meeting concludes. In the meantime, Yoo-tak advises his younger sister, Do-jin, to develop feelings for Ju-won, suspecting that Ju-won and Kenny-e are primarily interested in the family's wealth and assets rather than genuine affection. Elsewhere, Moon-soo meets up with her best friend, Kim Won-jin, who was left paralyzed after being one of the victims of the mall collapse. Won-jin has since become an online comic author. During their conversation, Moon-soo shares her experiences with Kang-do, and Won-jin casually remarks that he might just be her soulmate. Kang-do, on the other hand, reflects on the offer made by Ju-won during their chance encounter at the bar. In that meeting, Ju-won reveals that he has discovered Kang-do as the one responsible for destroying the monument at the Seowon project site. The following day at the office, Moon-soo is taken aback when Kang-do enters her office. During their meeting with Ju-won, Kang-do informs them that he has accepted the offer to investigate Yoo-tak, the finance director at the company. Alongside the financial incentive, Kang-do accepts the offer because he witnesses Ju-won's genuine desire to ensure that the Seowon company project is carried out without causing harm to the workers, as it happened 12 years ago. By chance, Kang-do and Moon-soo bump into each other at a convenience store near the office. Moon-soo speaks curtly to Kang-do, urging him to focus on his work. In response, Kang-do leans in closer to Moon-soo's face, trying to determine if she is the same girl he encountered during the mall collapse. In that past traumatic incident, Kang-do prioritized Moon-soo's safety, allowing the rescue team to save her. Later that night, Moon-soo confides in Won-jin about her recent frustrating encounter with Kang-do. To her surprise, instead of sympathizing, Won-jin laughs and warns Moon-soo to be cautious, as hatred can sometimes evolve into love. Their lighthearted banter takes a sudden turn when Won-jin experiences a stomach cramp. Concerned, Moon-soo rushes her to the hospital, where Jae-young takes charge of caring for Won-jin as the attending doctor. The following day, Won-jin is discharged from the hospital, and Jae-young accompanies her to the front entrance as they prepare to go home with Moon-soo. As they flag down a taxi, to their astonishment, Kang-do is the driver who immediately assists Won-jin into the car. Moon-soo is taken aback by Kang-do's presence, especially upon discovering that he is Jae-young's older brother. Won-jin, on the other hand, is captivated by Kang-do's kind nature, which shines through despite his rough exterior. On another day at the office, Ju-won and Moon-soo are engrossed in discussing construction matters, which sparks jealousy in Yoo-jin. Moon-soo, too, becomes uneasy witnessing the growing closeness between Ju-won and Yoo-jin, as they still appear like a couple. During their visit to the project site, Moon-soo intentionally ignores Kang-do, but their ensuing debate catches Yoo-jin's attention. Kang-do takes the opportunity to guide Yoo-jin to see the damaged monument. Upon returning to the office, Kang-do learns that Moon-soo went to review the project alone. Worried, he quickly searches for her and finds her trapped in a deep watering hole. Without hesitation, Kang-do rushes to her aid, helping her climb out. At that moment, Moon-soo begins to realize that she has misjudged Kang-do all along. Later in the afternoon, they find themselves waiting for the bus together. However, when Moon-soo boards the bus, Kang-do deliberately chooses not to join her, even though they could have taken the same bus home. Surprisingly, Moon-soo decides to catch up with Kang-do, surprising him in turn. She expresses her gratitude for saving her, and reveals that since their encounter and hearing Kang-do's advice about finding happiness, she has started to change by prioritizing her own well-being and that of those around her. Some time passes and Moon-soo decides to invite Yoon to go shopping and have a meal together in an effort to help her mother move forward from the grief of Yeon-soo's departure. On the other hand, Jae-young continues to receive kind treatment from Sookie, who asks her to keep her illness a secret from Kang-do. Later that night, during a dinner with the project team, Moon-soo coincidentally overhears a conversation between Ju-won and Kang-do, revealing that Kang-do is the one responsible for destroying the monument at the project site. As the dinner continues, they discuss the reconstruction of the monument, and to everyone's surprise, Yoo-tak opposes the idea. This revelation shocks Moon-soo, and to her surprise, she accidentally burns her hand. Once the dinner concludes, Moon-soo notices her burnt hand, and Kang-do appears to offer her medicine for her wounds. However, Gi quickly retreats upon seeing Ju-won's attention towards Moon-soo. The following day, Kang-do is taken by surprise when Moon-soo enters the office at the project site. However, she acts as if nothing is out of the ordinary, despite having seen Kang-do's injured body while tending to his wounds previously. Moon-soo then invites Kang-do to accompany her to the damaged monument and questions why he destroyed it. She suspects that Kang-do either had a personal connection to the mall collapse or knew someone who was a victim. Kang-do becomes annoyed by the questioning and changes the subject, asking if Moon-soo remembers a famous band from the past. Surprisingly, Moon-soo claims to have no recollection of the band whatsoever. This leads Moon-soo to meet with Won-jin after work to inquire about the band Kang-do mentioned. Won-jin reveals that it was a band Moon-soo used to play often during her time in the hospital. Strangely, Moon-soo cannot recall any memories associated with the band, adding to the growing mystery surrounding her forgotten past. In a bustling tavern, Kang-do's eyes stumble upon a childhood photo of Moon-soo, displayed amongst the memorabilia by Dong-chul. A rush of vivid memories floods Kang-do's mind, even though Moon-soo remains oblivious to their shared past. Determined to find her, Kang-do sets off to the office, but a bittersweet sight greets him instead. Ju-won and Yoo-jin are inseparable, their closeness painting a portrait of affection. Kang-do feels a pang of sympathy for Yoo-jin, knowing the depth of her unrequited love for Ju-won. He offers a heartfelt piece of advice, cautioning her against investing too much love, for it can slip away all too easily. With Moon-soo still out of reach, Kang-do seeks solace at Mira's bar. Little does he know, fate has a plan in store. The universe aligns their paths, and Moon-soo, on a mission to find him, arrives at the same spot. They decide to seek solace in a roadside tavern together. Gratitude fills Moon-soo's words as she thanks Kang-do for his sage advice, expressing remorse for her previous misjudgment. She now understands the motive behind Kang-do's act of demolishing the monument, a heartfelt desire for all the victims to be remembered with dignity by everyone. In the meantime, Yoo-jin manages to uncover information about Kang-do, fueling her suspicions. She becomes wary of his involvement in their project, knowing that Kang-do is the son of a worker who was unjustly blamed for the mall collapse. To her dismay, Yoo-tak refuses to take responsibility for Kang-do's father's tragic death. In a separate encounter, Kang-do seeks answers from Mira about Yoo-tak, who happens to be a prominent customer at her bar. Sometime later, Yoo-jin meets with Ju-won at the office to discuss the reconstruction project for the monument that Kang-do had previously destroyed. She proposes involving Moon-soo in the project, to which Ju-won agrees without hesitation. Just as Kang-do is about to leave, he unexpectedly crosses paths with Moon-soo, who rushes into the office and inadvertently collides with him. When they convene at the office, Ju-won begins to show more attentiveness towards Moon-soo, even providing her with lunch in return for the lunchbox she had prepared. Despite her attempts to temper her expectations, Moon-soo can't help but wonder about her boss's intentions. In his room, Yoo-tak adamantly opposes the idea of Kang-do being in charge of the monument rebuilding project. However, Yoo-jin insists and pushes her older brother to approve the project, causing tension between them. Later that evening, Yoo-jin invites Kang-do to dine together at a tavern recommended by Dong-cheol. During their conversation, Yoo-jin opens up about her one-sided affection and confesses that she already knows about Kang-do's background, expressing her intention to keep a close watch on him. Over the following days, Moon-soo frequently visits the project site, fostering a growing closeness between her and Kang-do. They begin having lunch together more often, enjoying each other's company. During one of their meals at a restaurant, Kang-do looks at Moon-soo with pride, witnessing how the girl he once aided in the past has blossomed into a beautiful young woman, fearlessly pursuing her dream of becoming an architect. That evening, Yoo-tak pays a visit to Mary's bar seeking advice and listening to her stories about Kang-do. Deeply moved by their conversation, Yoo-tak undergoes a transformation, finally agreeing to appoint Kang-do as the person in charge of the monument rebuilding project tied to the mall's collapse. The following day, Kang-do encounters Yoo-tak, who has granted him the contract for the construction of the monument. After the meeting, Kang-do comes across Moon-soo, who is taking a moment to rest on the steps of a building. Intrigued, Moon-soo decides to follow Kang-do, and he extends an invitation for her to join him at his residence. They spend time together on the rooftop, engrossed in various books. Kang-do secretly observes Moon-soo, delighted by her happiness and the ease with which she interacts with Sang-man, creating a sense of harmony. After a few days, Kang-do is engrossed in his work at the project site when a sudden loud noise reverberates through the air. The sound triggers a relapse of his trauma, taking him back to the harrowing memories of being trapped in the ruins of the collapsed mall. As night descends, Kang-do becomes even more fearful, especially when he is alone, with the rain pouring and the ominous sound of thunder. On the other hand, Moon-soo grows increasingly concerned about Kang-do's well-being at the project site. Taking the initiative, she decides to catch up with him. Upon arriving, she discovers that Kang-do is not in the project office. Worried, she quickly searches for him outside. Unbeknownst to Moon-soo, Kang-do finds himself at one of the construction sites, where he believes he hears a voice pleading for help from behind a barricaded wall. Driven by unconscious instinct, he begins digging frantically. Sensing something amiss, Moon-soo rushes to his side and manages to revive him from his trance. Realizing that Kang-do has been haunted by the haunting memories of Sung-jae, his past companion in the rubble of the building 10 years ago. Once he regains consciousness, Kang-do assists Moon-soo by providing support for the unstable board. The following morning, the workers diligently repair the damage caused by Kang-do this night, under the direct supervision of Ju-won, who happens to witness Moon-soo lending a helping hand to the workers. Ju-won recalls how Moon-soo had abruptly left the scene the night before, but he never anticipated that she would cross paths with Kang-do at the project site. During a moment of rest, Moon-soo approaches Kang-do, curious to know the truth about his experience the previous night. Kang-do opens up and shares that he heard someone pleading for help from behind a wall, compelling him to dig desperately. Concern washes over Moon-soo as she listens to his account. While in the office, Yoo-jin pressures Yoo-tak to reassess the project in light of the infiltration collapse, fearing a repeat of the events that occurred a decade ago. Unfortunately, Yutak dismisses her concerns, emphasizing the urgency of completing the mall while their father is still alive, striving to showcase their achievements to the entire board of directors. The scene shifts to the project site, where Ju-won meticulously examines the area of the collapsed infiltration, haunted by memories of the tragedy that plagued his father with guilt a decade ago. Upon returning to the office, Ju-won finally discovers that both Moon-soo and Kang-do were survivors of the same tragedy, intensifying his feelings of guilt towards them. Later that night, Kang-do, nursing his injury, seeks Sooki's assistance in treating his wound. He expresses concern that his injury might cause the woman he cares about to dislike him. Mary, who happens to be present, is taken aback by Kang-do's unexpected consideration for others, and she begins to suspect that the girl she saw with Kang-do at the bar could be his girlfriend. As Kang-do departs, Sooki inquires about the girl, intrigued by the person who has captured Kang-do's heart. The next day, Kang-do visits Ju-won and proposes halting the construction of the building project until the land is deemed safe for development. However, as the project leader, Ju-won is unable to halt the project without valid reasons. He challenges Kang-do to gather evidence proving the unsuitability of the land for construction. Ju-won even lends his car to Kang-do and Moon-soo, who are set to review the project materials, as he worries about Moon-soo getting exhausted. In the meantime, Moon-soo finally meets a man named Seo-jun, who is a family member of one of the victims. Seo-jun expresses gratitude for receiving compensation for his father's death from Soo-won's company, which enabled him to pursue education and secure a job at a reputable bank. However, he refuses to sign the monument rebuilding proposal, as he still harbors resentment towards everyone involved in the mall collapse that took his father's life. After the meeting, Kang-do coincidentally runs into Seo-jun, who feels a sense of familiarity towards him. However, Moon-soo is irritated with Kang-do for getting into fights once again. Later that night, Kang-do is assigned the task of staying up alone after his colleague fails to show up. As he spends the night by himself, Kang-do is plagued by memories of Sung-jae, who was with him under the ruins of a building in the past. The painful memories of Sung-jae's tragic death continue to haunt Kang-do. Meanwhile, Moon-soo also carries the burden of guilt for the loss of her first love, Sung-jae. The following day, Moon-soo stops by the project site in search of Kang-do, but doesn't find him. Instead, she leaves an ice cream for him with Yong-chol. As Moon-soo is about to leave, she unexpectedly encounters Sooki, who is trying to see the construction of a mall building on her land. However, Yong-chol prevents her from entering, which upsets Sooki and causes her to faint. Concerned for Sooki's well-being, Moon-soo rushes her to the hospital. Once Sooki regains consciousness, she expresses gratitude to Moon-soo and insists that she doesn't want to be a burden. However, Moon-soo cannot bear to leave her alone and waits until Sooki falls asleep before going out to buy peaches. During her absence, Jae-young arrives to check on Sooki. On the other hand, Yutak spends time with Mary and shares the pressure he faces from the board of directors and his younger sister to construct a mall. He reveals his agreement with Ju-won and Yoo-jin's perspective, as he wants to avoid repeating the mistakes of his father from 10 years ago. When Moon-soo returns to the hospital, she finds Sooki in good health and offers her the peach she purchased. Touched by Moon-soo's kindness, Sooki promises to repay the favor by finding a potential boyfriend for Moon-soo. At a later time, Kang-do is surprised to find Moon-soo at his house, but she appears annoyed to see his fresh scars, as if he was recently in a fight. Since it's late at night, Kang-do drives her to the bus stop so she can catch the last bus and return home quickly. As they wait at the bus stop, Kang-do smiles to himself while reading a message from Moon-soo. The following day, Jin-young meets Won-jin and insists on becoming her personal assistant, pressuring her to accept him. Meanwhile, Kang-do starts searching for evidence to temporarily halt the construction project, ensuring that the land is safe for building. When he returns to the project site office, Kang-do happily indulges in the ice cream given by Moon-soo, ignoring Yong-chol's advice not to eat ice cream for breakfast. He even sends her a photo of the ice cream stick as a playful gesture. On another occasion when Kang-do meets Sooki, she becomes upset with him for being busy texting Moon-soo and not paying attention to her. Another day, Moon-soo decides to wear lipstick when accompanying Kang-do to visit another victim's family. However, when Yoonok sees her, she becomes furious and immediately removes the lipstick, reminded of her deceased daughter Yeon-soo. Moon-soo feels guilty for causing her mother's pain and becomes sad. Kang-do tries to comfort her by suggesting they go to an amusement park, since their appointment with the victim's family was cancelled. That day, Moon-soo is filled with joy after riding the various exhilarating rides at the amusement park. As night descends, they find themselves sitting in a cozy tavern, reluctant to part ways and return home. The peaceful atmosphere leads them to a beautiful beach, where they bask in the serenity of the night. Moon-soo, who has had a bit too much to drink, suddenly surprises Kang-do with a grateful kiss for being there to comfort her. Soon after, she falls asleep, finding solace on Kang-do's shoulder. The next morning, as Moon-soo awakens, she has no memory of the events that transpired the previous night. Realizing she had fallen asleep on Kang-do's shoulder, she feels a sense of confusion and embarrassment. During their bus ride home, Moon-soo opens up about the late Yun-soo, recounting her guilt over the tragedy that claimed her life in the mall collapse. Kang-do, who is already aware of Yun-soo's story as she was a renowned child actress, shares his own tale of loss, speaking of his father who also perished in the incident. Their conversation brings a sense of relief and understanding as they find solace in their shared past experiences. Back at home, Yoon-ok tenderly styles her daughter's hair, expressing her apologies for her behavior the previous day. Moon-soo graciously accepts her mother's apology, understanding the depth of her love and concern. Meanwhile, in the office, Ju-won confronts Yoo-tak with evidence of subpar project materials, accusing Jong-ki, the procurement manager, of attempting to deceive him. Ju-won makes it clear that Yoo-tak must take swift action if he wants the project to continue. The tension at the project site escalates as Ju-won rejects all the materials delivered by the SAG manager, highlighting the alleged cheating. Later that evening, Moon-soo contacts Kang-do, inviting him to share a meal together. Eagerly, Kang-do rushes to meet her. After dinner, Kang-do drives Moon-soo home. However, his joy is overshadowed when he notices his daughter being accompanied by a seemingly rough-looking man, causing Yoon-ok to harbor disapproval. On their way home, Kang-do feels a deep sense of disappointment in himself, realizing the negative impression he has unknowingly made on Yoon-ok. In the meantime, the tension within Ju-won's family dinner weighs heavily on him, as he witnesses the sacrifices his mother, Ki-ae, continues to make in order to fit into Yoo-jin's family. The weight of these circumstances takes a toll on Ju-won, rendering him unwell and unable to attend work the following day. Upon learning of Ju-won's illness, Moon-soo rushes to his apartment to deliver urgent work files that require his immediate attention. As she enters his living space, Moon-soo notices the emptiness of the place and the presence of stale food in the refrigerator, giving her a glimpse into Ju-won's solitary and neglected life. Back at the office, the atmosphere is chaotic as many employees struggle to manage the workload in Ju-won's absence. The project site is no exception, lacking the conducive environment necessary for work. Despite his own concerns, Ju-won forces himself to visit the project site in his compromised state. Witnessing Ju-won's determination, Kang-do feels a deep sense of sympathy for his sick colleague, but remains focused on completing his tasks. However, due to Ju-won's weakened state, he nearly collapses, but Kang-do acts quickly, saving him from a potential fall, albeit at the cost of his own injury. When Ju-won drives Kang-do to Sooki's house for treatment, Sooki expresses her anger towards Kang-do for not taking proper care of himself. She also advises Ju-won to prioritize his health and offers him a concoction, hoping it will aid his recovery and enable him to fulfill his dream of building a skyscraper. Upon arriving home, Kang-do is taken aback to find Moon-soo waiting for him in front of his house. She grumbles about not being able to contact him, especially after hearing about the accident he was involved in. Soon after, Moon-soo receives a call from Won-jin, who is engaged in an argument with Jin-young. Arriving at Won-jin's house, Moon-soo finds herself in a heated dispute with Jin-young over a bag. The altercation escalates, resulting in Moon-soo falling and hitting her head on the floor, causing her to collapse. Worried, Won-jin observes as Moon-soo experiences amnesia due to the impact of the fall. Kang-do, who was by Moon-soo's side during the incident, finally discovers the reason behind her forgotten memories of their past. Once the dispute with Jin-young is resolved and Moon-soo regains consciousness, she invites Won-jin to join her for a meal on Kang-do's rooftop. As they spend time together that night, their companionship rekindles, and they appear once again as a united pair. On another day, after conducting a thorough inspection of the project site, Ju-won returns to his office and decides to dispose of all his draft drives. The following day, he announces to his team that he wants to change the building designs and conduct another site inspection. While this decision disappoints the team members, Moon-soo supports Ju-won's move, emphasizing the importance of strengthening the building's foundation, even if it means changing the design. Meanwhile, Kang-do visits a car showroom where he encounters Yoo-jin. They discuss their shared goal of helping and protecting Ju-won from those who wish to obstruct the Siwon construction project. Yoo-jin then takes Kang-do to the office, unintentionally stirring feelings of jealousy in Moon-soo. Inside the office, as Moon-soo intends to wake the sleeping Ju-won, Kang-do intervenes and asks about the materials needed to restart the project. Upon learning the specific materials required, Kang-do and Moon-soo quickly set out to acquire them. They reach out to Kang-do's former foreman, with whom he had a conflict in the past, but with their combined efforts, they manage to obtain the necessary items and reconcile their differences. Sometime later, Kang-do is pleasantly surprised to discover that Moon-soo can drive a large truck, which comes in handy for transporting construction materials to the project site. Moon-soo is delighted to showcase her driving skills, especially since Dong-chul isn't as skilled behind the wheel. They arrive at the project site, and Kang-do captures a photo of Moon-soo confidently maneuvering the large truck to its destination. During the evening, Ju-won pays an unexpected visit to Moon-soo's house, impressing both Yoon-ok and Aunt Moon-soo with his good looks and his skill in repairing the waterways in the sauna. In gratitude, Yoon-ok quickly prepares a meal for Ju-won to show her appreciation for his help. On the other hand, Kang-do receives dinner from Sooki, and despite his playful complaints about the food, he enjoys the canned meal that she has prepared for him. The following day, Sooki is delighted to be reunited with Moon-soo after her visit to her best friend's house. Sooki seizes the opportunity to invite Moon-soo to her home, where she introduces her to Kang-do. However, Sooki keeps her illness a secret from Kang-do, claiming that she met Moon-soo while getting lost on the street. Sensing something deeper, Sooki asks Kang-do to accompany Moon-soo home, secretly hoping to observe their closeness. During their journey home, they make a stop at a playground. Moon-soo opens up to Kang-do about her childhood, expressing her guilt for not being a better sister and daughter to her parents. In a comforting embrace, Kang-do reassures her, acknowledging that she has always done her best. As they reach the bus stop, they cherish their time together, holding hands and savoring the silent connection between them, causing Moon-soo to miss several buses that pass by. The next day, Moon-soo's office colleagues surprise her with a makeover before she visits the project site. With a refreshed appearance, Moon-soo is greeted by Kang-do, who compliments her beauty. However, an incident leads Moon-soo to leave the site feeling disappointed. Later, they return to the office and encounter Seo-jun, who handles the project's funds. Seo-jun becomes emotional upon seeing Kang-do and accuses Dong-yong, Kang-do's father, of being responsible for the tragedy that claimed the lives of 48 victims. Despite his anger, Kang-do tries to restrain himself and doesn't retaliate when Seo-jun hits him with a bag of cement. Heartbroken by Seo-jun's words, Moon-soo refuses to listen to Kang-do's explanation, deepening their rift. However, Ju-won witnesses the situation and invites Kang-do to clean up and talk at the sauna. There, Ju-won reveals that the collapse of the mall building was not caused by Dong-yong's actions and assures Kang-do that his father is not to blame. He urges Kang-do not to carry unnecessary guilt. Later that night, Ju-won invites Moon-soo to a fancy restaurant for dinner. However, Moon-soo remembers a message from Kang-do, who waits for her at Dong-chul's tavern. Ju-won kindly drives her to the tavern instead. When Kang-do sees Moon-soo with Ju-won, he decides to hide and eventually leaves, feeling inferior and realizing that Ju-won also has feelings for Moon-soo. At the tavern, Dong-chul approaches his daughter and seems amiable towards Ju-won, who accompanied her. However, Dong-chul forbids Moon-soo from getting close to Kang-do, perceiving him as a delinquent. Moon-soo insists that her father shouldn't judge Kang-do unfairly and encourages him and Yoon-ok to live their lives without being burdened by Kang-do's past. In the meantime, Kang-do, heartbroken, sits by the sea alone. Yoo-jin finds him there and shares that she feels a sense of calm whenever she's with him. She sympathizes with Kang-do, as they both experienced being rejected by their respective love interests. Yoo-jin feels fortunate to have found someone who understands her situation. On the other hand, Moon-soo visits Kang-do's house and encounters Sang-man, who informs her that Kang-do is not home. Together, they search for Kang-do, and eventually spot him conversing with Yoo-jin on a bridge, triggering feelings of jealousy in Moon-soo. Frustrated, Moon-soo seeks solace at Won-jin's house, where she vents her anger towards Kang-do, despite him not deserving it. Wonjin simply smiles and reveals that Moon-soo has developed feelings for Kang-do. The next day, Jung-ki is filled with excitement as he gets Yu-tak's approval to fire Kang-do. He discusses the issue of Dong-yong stealing project goods and worries that Kang-do might follow in his father's footsteps. At the office, Yu-jin, who has met with Yu-tak, strongly opposes her older brother's decision to fire Kang-do. She reminds Yu-tak that he has no right to mistreat Kang-do, especially considering that Yu-tak himself chose not to compensate for Dong-yong's death. Later on, after getting fired, Kang-do distances himself from Moon-soo. He avoids accompanying her to visit the families of the mall collapse victims, and he doesn't provide any updates to her at all. On another day, Kang-do meets Seo-jun to apologize for his father's past mistakes. Seo-jun, upon hearing this, also apologizes for speaking ill of Dong-yong. He confesses that he let his emotions get the best of him and needed to vent his anger regarding his father's death. However, Seo-jun ends up expressing gratitude towards Kang-do for his efforts in rebuilding the memorial for the victims. After hearing this, Kang-do hurries off to find Moon-soo, as Seo-jun informs him that she had come looking for him earlier and asked him to pass on an apology. At the tavern, Ju-won encounters Dong-chul. He still remembers how Dong-chul blamed his father for the tragedy that befell Yun-soo. However, at present, Dong-chul does not seem to recognize Ju-won as the son of the architect behind the collapsed mall building. In the meantime, when Kang-do arrives at Moon-soo's house, he overhears Yoonok expressing her desire for a son-in-law like Ju-won. Feeling discouraged, Kang-do decides not to meet Moon-soo and chooses to leave. As Kang-do boards the bus to go home, to his surprise, Moon-soo appears and sits next to him. She had anticipated his arrival and hurried to catch up with him. After they get off the bus, Kang-do suggests that Moon-soo should be with Ju-won, who can treat her well. Moon-soo becomes angry and scolds Kang-do, but he ultimately decides to leave her life, leaving her feeling sad. Another day, Ju-won meets Kang-do and tries to persuade him to return to work on the memorial project for the mall collapse victims. However, Kang-do rejects the offer for various reasons. Instead, he requests that Ju-won help Moon-soo complete the construction of the memorial. On the other hand, Yu-tak is seen trying to seduce Sookie, who owns the land where the mall construction project is taking place. He hopes to convince her to sell the land. However, Sookie pays no attention to his advances and is only interested in the food he ordered for her. At the office, Moon-soo encounters Ju-won and finds herself feeling uneasy as she realizes she pays more attention to him due to his seniority and position of authority. On another occasion, when Moon-soo visits the project site, she is shocked to discover that Kang-do is no longer working there. Worried and confused, she seeks out Yu-jin for an explanation. Yu-jin reveals that Kang-do refused to return to work, even though both Moon-soo and Kang-do are the ideal team to complete the memorial project as survivors of the tragedy 10 years ago. Hearing this, Moon-soo suddenly recalls the image of Kang-do trapped under the rubble of a collapsed building with her. Driven by her realization, Moon-soo rushes to Kang-do's house, only to find out from Sangman that he has already embarked on a fishing boat. Desperate, Moon-soo races to the dock, but the ship carrying Kang-do has already sailed, leaving her deeply saddened by their separation. That night, Moon-soo decides to sleep in Kang-do's room, surprising In-seok when she discovers her there. In-seok learns why Moon-soo chose to sleep in the room and shares her own story of how she first encountered a disheveled Kang-do, which filled her with sympathy for him. Meanwhile, even though Kang-do has distanced himself from Moon-soo, he can't stop thinking about her. On another note, when Sookie visits Yoonok's salon, she asks for a hair makeover. After her hair is done, Sookie heads to the sauna but ends up fainting. Moon-soo, who is aware of the situation, rushes her to the hospital. Once he regains consciousness, she insists on going home despite Moon-soo's efforts to persuade her otherwise. At the hospital reception, Jae-young meets them and reveals that Sookie has a tumor in her brain. He refuses surgery because she fears losing her memory. Moon-soo pleads with Jae-young to inform Kang-do so he can help convince Sookie to seek treatment. On the ship, Kang-do receives news about Sookie and hurriedly returns to the dock. There he meets Jae-young and immediately rushes to Sookie's place, pleading with her to undergo the tumor surgery. Despite the fact that Sookie may not remember him, Kang-do wishes for her to have a longer life. When Kang-do returns home, he finally encounters Moon-soo waiting for him. She tells him that she remembers their past together during the mall collapse tragedy. but Kang-do dismisses her and asks her to leave. Moon-soo then meets Dong-chul, who reveals that his daughter didn't work at the site of the tragedy 10 years ago because he was afraid Yoon-ok would be upset if she found out. Dong-chul is concerned about Moon-soo's well-being and the painful memories associated with that place. Before going to bed, Moon-soo can't stop thinking about how Kang-do avoided her after driving her away. She recalls Sooki's advice, suggesting that Kang-do distanced himself because he felt inferior and unworthy of her. As a result, the next day, Moon-soo approaches Kang-do, showing her concern for him despite his cold behavior. On a different day, Kang-do meets Sooki at the playground and pleads with her to go to the hospital for treatment. After much persuasion, Sooki finally agrees. When Kang-do returns home, he searches for Moon-soo, who is always waiting for him. However, he feels disappointed as she is nowhere to be found. To his surprise, he breaks into a smile when he discovers Moon-soo in his room. But his demeanor quickly changes, and he asks her to leave. Moon-soo bids him farewell, but she is comforted by the fact that she saw him smile when he saw her. The following day, Sooki begins her treatment at the hospital, and Kang-do continues to be by her side. Moon-soo also visits Sooki, bringing her favorite canned food. Along with Moon-soo, Mori, and others, come to support and encourage Sooki during her time in the hospital. During a visit to the hospital restroom, Kang-do experiences a nosebleed. Despite his condition, he tries to hide it and acts as if nothing is wrong when he leaves the restroom. Unbeknownst to him, one of the doctors in the restroom witnesses his nosebleed. After leaving the restroom, Kang-do is devastated to learn that Sooki's condition has worsened, and she needs to undergo immediate surgery to remove the tumor. Unfortunately, despite the surgery, Sooki's condition doesn't improve, and she eventually passes away. The news leaves everyone, especially Kang-do, heartbroken. He chooses to isolate himself in his room, consumed by grief. In the days following Sooki's passing, Kang-do meets with a lawyer who handles her will, officially making him the heir to Sooki's estate. Meanwhile, Yutak is frustrated and unsure about how to proceed with the project since Sooki's death leaves him uncertain about the land's ownership. Unable to find Kang-do at his house, Moon-soo decides to search for him at Mary's bar. Mary advises Moon-soo to be patient with Kang-do and recalls how they first met, with him saving her from a dangerous situation. Kang-do spends his days feeling lonely and reads a letter from Sooki, which only intensifies his sadness and longing for her. Meanwhile, in a hospital, Jae-young receives advice from a senior to check on Kang-do's health, as he witnessed him having a nosebleed in the restroom. When Kang-do walked home, he couldn't help but notice Moon-soo handing food to Sang-man. In a hurry, he snatched the food from Sang-man and returned it to Moon-soo. He bluntly asked her to stop sending him food, but his brusque manner didn't deter her from trying to stay close to him. On another day, Kang-do met with Ju-won to share his plan of moving the memorial to a different location. Ju-won wasn't optimistic, knowing that getting Yutak's approval would be a challenge. After their meeting, as Kang-do was about to leave, Moon-soo deliberately blocked his path. Thinking quickly, he invited Yoo-jin, who had just arrived, to accompany him, using it as an excuse to avoid Moon-soo. Seeing this, Moon-soo didn't show signs of jealousy, as she believed Kang-do was simply pretending to keep her away. Yoo-jin, who was by Kang-do's side, revealed that she didn't mind his childish behavior, interpreting it as his way of making Moon-soo feel jealous. Another day, Kang-do approaches Mary and asks for her help in arranging a meeting with Yutak. When they finally meet, Yutak is taken aback to learn that Kang-do has become the owner of the land he needs for his project. Kang-do tears up the previous agreement between Yutak and Sooki, insisting on updating its terms, which irritates Yutak. After the meeting ends, Mary confronts Yutak, offended by his disrespectful words about Sooki and Kang-do. That night, overwhelmed by his longing for Sooki, Kang-do visits her traditional medicine shop, only to find Moon-soo and the others already there. They gather together, savoring Sooki's favorite food and sharing cherished memories of her kindness. Everyone takes turns recounting their experiences, except for Kang-do, who remains silent, his sorrow over Sooki's passing still evident. After the meeting, Jae-young approaches Moon-soo in secret and urges her to take the medicine that Kang-do has been using, expressing concern for her brother's health. Jae-young reveals how Kang-do was rescued after surviving under the rubble for several days. Moon-soo, unaware of this, was evacuated earlier and couldn't inform the rescuers about Kang-do's presence due to her fainting. When Moon-soo approaches her home, thoughts of Kang-do still occupy her mind. She decides to return to the traditional medicine shop where Sooki used to work. When she arrives, she finds Kang-do terrified by a nightmare from the tragedy that occurred 10 years ago. He insists that Moon-soo leave, but she refuses to abandon him and tries to comfort him by holding his head. Kang-do pushes her away, warning that if she doesn't leave immediately, he won't let her go for good. However, Moon-soo pays no heed and embraces him, determined to stay by his side. That night, Kang-do finally falls into a peaceful sleep with Moon-soo by his side. The next day, before parting ways, Moon-soo asks Kang-do not to be cold and rude to her, and he agrees. On that day, Kang-do finalizes the sale of the land with Yutak and feels a sense of relief. That evening, he invites Moon-soo to meet and they enjoy street food together. Kang-do is filled with happiness as he holds Moon-soo's hand and looks up at the sky, wishing that Sookie can witness their joy. When they reach the front of Moon-soo's house, Kang-do bids her goodbye. Moon-soo's aunt, Jum-chan, observes their interaction with delight, noting how Kang-do brings a smile to Moon-soo's face like no one else. At Mary's place, forgiveness finds its way into her heart, and she accepts Yutak's agreement to Kang-do's terms in the land purchase agreement. Despite being initially upset by Kang-do's behavior, Yutak finds solace in Mary's smile, which brings him comfort. The following day, Kang-do excitedly shares the news with Ju-won about Yutak's agreement to relocate the memorial monument. Feeling more confident, he opens up to Ju-won about his feelings for Moon-soo, especially now that she has become the heir to a wealthy land. After the meeting, Kang-do decides to celebrate his newfound optimism by taking Sang-nam shopping for new clothes. They embrace this fresh start, symbolizing a rebirth for Kang-do. Elsewhere, Moon-soo sneaks into Kang-do's room and takes some of the medicinal pills he has been using. When Kang-do returns home with his new look, Moon-soo is captivated by his transformation. However, their intimate moment is interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Sang-nam in Kang-do's room. On another occasion, Moon-soo hands over the pills she took to Jae-young and asks her to inform her about Kang-do's health once the results of the drug examination are available. Sometime later, Kang-do invites Moon-soo to meet one of the families affected by the tragedy from 10 years ago. As the weather is cold, he embraces her from behind, keeping her warm. However, the following day, Moon-soo is unable to come to work due to the flu, which worries Kang-do. After returning home from work, Kang-do plans to visit Moon-soo, but he hesitates when he remembers Yoonok's strong disapproval of him. Instead, he decides to secretly climb up the wall and enter Moon-soo's room through the window. In a tender moment, Yoonok enters the room to bring warm tea to her daughter, forcing Kang-do to hide behind a blanket. Once Yoonok leaves, Kang-do shares a kiss with Moon-soo before quietly leaving through the window. The following day, Yoonok is taken aback when she discovers a flyer in her mailbox about a project at the site of a tragedy from 10 years ago. Curiosity drives her to visit the location of the project. Upon arrival, she unexpectedly sees Moon-soo and Kang-do standing in front of the construction site, which leaves her wondering why her daughter is there. Meanwhile, Moon-soo notices that Kang-do is still suffering from the flu she gave him, and they both enter the project area together. Unfortunately, their presence together intensifies Yoonok's unease, prompting her to hurriedly return home. Back at home, Yoonok begins to search Moon-soo's room and stumbles upon a file containing information about the memorial project, which Moon-soo has been keeping hidden from her mother. At the project site, Moon-soo and Kang-do are frequently seen together, and Kang-do can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy when he sees Ju-won conducting progress checks on the project. Yoo-jin arrives and joins them, overseeing Moon-soo's work on relocating the memorial. During their discussion, Yoo-jin advises Moon-soo to be mindful of Ju-won's feelings and not display excessive affection towards Kang-do. At the project office, Moon-soo and Kang-do encounter Moon-soo's colleague, So-mai, who brings food to the site. So-mai expresses her envy toward Moon-soo and Kang-do's relationship, and even offers suggestions for interesting places that new couples can visit. Moon-soo becomes enthusiastic about the recommendations, while Yoonok, who has discovered her daughter's work documents, visits Dong-chul to inform him about Moon-soo's involvement in a project related to Yoon-soo's death. Dong-chul advises Yoonok to start letting go of her memories and guilt surrounding their second daughter's passing. However, Yoonok misinterprets Dong-chul's words and believes that he and Moon-soo are not grieving over Yoon-soo's death. Meanwhile, at the project office, Kang-do suddenly experiences a nosebleed, causing Dong-chul to panic as Kang-do appears healthy. Simultaneously, Jae-young becomes concerned about her brother's health after receiving the lab results from the medication he has been taking. She decides to dig into his medical history to find answers. After work, Mary helps Kang-do prepare the customary concoction given to him by Suki. They'd engage in conversation, and Kang-do asks Mary to refrain from getting involved with Yu-tak, believing that she deserves better than him. In the following days, Yu-nak chooses to feign ignorance about Moon-soo's hidden activities. Meanwhile, Yu-tak invites Mary to enjoy the picturesque scenery by the lake and shares her greatest dream of living life according to her own wishes, should her father grant her the opportunity. On another occasion, Kang-do accompanies Moon-soo to buy a graduation gift for Jae-young's doctorate. Secretly, Kang-do also purchases a gift for Moon-soo, which brings her joy. On a different occasion, Yoo-jin goes on a blind date with the son of a minister, a potential match for her in an arranged marriage. However, being on this date triggers memories of her past relationship with Ju-won during their college years. Back then, Ju-won was a popular student who stood up for her and became the target of jealousy and resentment due to her privileged background as the daughter of a renowned contractor company owner. Sadly, their relationship had to come to an end when their parents decided to get married. In the present, Yoo-jin decides to leave the blind date and seeks out Ju-won to express her true feelings. On the other hand, Moon-soo becomes concerned when she doesn't find her mother at home. To her surprise, Yu-nak is found at Yeon-soo's gravesite, having gone there to eat a meal with her. When Yu-nak returns home drunk, she starts blaming Moon-soo for Yeon-soo's disappearance in the past and accuses her and Dong-chul of forgetting about Yeon-soo. Moon-soo is deeply hurt by these accusations, as Yu-nak continues to believe that she failed to protect her sister during the tragedy. Distraught from the argument, Moon-soo decides to seek comfort from Dong-chul and asks him to accompany Yu-nok, who is left alone at home. Shortly after Dong-chul leaves, Kang-do arrives at the tavern after being contacted by Dong-chul. He is asked to take care of Moon-soo. Seeing Moon-soo wearing sandals and without a jacket in the cold, Kang-do immediately offers her his jacket and carries her to Won-jin's house. That night, Moon-soo decides not to go back home. Upon arriving at Won-jin's house, Kang-do immediately takes Moon-soo to a room as she falls asleep on the way. When Moon-soo wakes up, she is overjoyed to see Kang-do still there, patiently waiting for her. She expresses her guilt for forgetting about Kang-do, while he never forgot about their time together during the tragedy. Moon-soo confesses that she has always had feelings for Kang-do, since they survived together in the collapsed building, but she was forced to forget their memories due to her memory loss. Kang-do reassures her and asks her to let go of the burden and guilt, because they are now reunited. The next morning, Ju-won and Yoo-jin feel a sense of unfamiliarity despite spending the night together. Ju-won is still concerned about Yoo-jin, but he can't fully express it. At the office, So-mei notices that Moon-soo and Ju-won are wearing the same clothes as the previous day. She finds it strange, but she is certain that the two of them didn't spend the night together because Moon-soo now has Kang-do by her side. At the project site, Kang-do becomes suspicious of Ju-won's decision not to investigate the wreckage of the collapsed building, especially after learning that Ju-won's father was the architect of the building. He wonders why Ju-won doesn't want to uncover the truth about the tragedy that happened 10 years ago. In the meantime, Moon-soo gathers the courage to visit Sung-jae's house. However, when she meets Sung-jae's mother, Jae-hyun, in front of the house, Jae-hyun seems to believe that her son is still alive. This encounter leaves Moon-soo puzzled and curious about Sung-jae's disappearance. Later that night, Moon-soo shares her encounter with Jae-hyun, Sung-jae's mother, with Kang-do. As she tells the story, memories of their own survival under the rubble resurface for Kang-do. They recall the days they spent together, clinging to hope until the rescue workers finally arrived. It was a difficult and traumatic experience, but it brought them closer. In the present, Kang-do decides to drive Moon-soo home because she needs to be with her mother, Yu-nok, who will rely on her for support. He understands the importance of family, and he wants to ensure Moon-soo's well-being during this time. They share a quiet drive, their hearts filled with the weight of their past experiences. The following day, Jae-young urges Kang-do to go to the hospital for a blood test to ensure his health. Meanwhile, Moon-soo, who stops by Won-jin's house, is taken aback by her best friend Jin-young's growing closeness with someone else. Back at the project site, tension rises as workers discover human bones among the ruins of the collapsed building from the past. This development frustrates Yu-tak, who becomes increasingly annoyed. Ju-won, on the other hand, remains focused on completing the building design within the given time frame. When Yu-tak visits the site, Kang-do throws a stick that Yutak mistakes for one of the bones found at the construction area. Kang-do insists on pausing the project temporarily to properly handle and bury the discovered bones. However, Yutak disregards his concerns. Determined to find evidence to support a halt in the development, Kang-do meets with Ju-won and reminds him of their promise. Kang-do expresses his confidence in Ju-won, hoping he won't repeat his father's mistakes. Unfortunately, Ju-won's indifferent attitude towards the situation disappoints Kang-do. Sometime later, Kang-do meets with Yu-jin to ensure that Ju-won doesn't repeat the mistakes of his father. Following their discussion, Yu-jin decides to conduct forensic tests on the discovered bones and halt the construction process until the examination is complete, protecting Ju-won from any blame associated with the find. Meanwhile, at the project site, Kang-do attempts to prevent a truck from transporting the debris of an old building that Moon-soo seems interested in. In a dangerous turn of events, Kang-do narrowly avoids being hit by falling rubble from the truck. Shortly after, he experiences a sudden nosebleed and faints. Despite concerns for his well-being, Kang-do adamantly refuses to be taken to the hospital, putting on a brave front for Moon-soo and the others. At the hospital, Jae-young is shocked by the results of Kang-do's blood test and feels guilty for not paying enough attention to her brother's health earlier. In the meantime, as Moon-soo waits for Kang-do to rest in his room, she discovers Sung-jae's cell phone, leading her to understand that Kang-do is still haunted by the trauma of Sung-jae's tragic death in the past. Overwhelmed with guilt, Moon-soo realizes that Kang-do's trauma stems from the fact that he stayed under the wreckage with Sung-jae's body for several days, waiting for the rescue team to arrive. The following day, Moon-soo encounters Kang-do at Sung-jae's house. She sincerely apologizes to Jae-hyun, acknowledging that she was the one who convinced Sung-jae to come to the mall before the collapse occurred. Kang-do then relays Sung-jae's final message, bringing tears to Jae-hyun's eyes. She expresses her gratitude to Kang-do for his efforts to meet her in the past, despite being ignored. That night, Moon-soo decides to distance herself from Kang-do, consumed by guilt over the misfortune that befell him and Sung-jae. Despite Kang-do's desire to spend the rest of his life with her, Moon-soo believes it is best to stay away from him. Returning home, Moon-soo shares with her mother, Yoonok, that she has ended her relationship with Kang-do and has chosen not to pursue any further romantic involvement. Yoonok is taken aback by the news and feels guilty for her daughter's pain. She begins to offer her support and blessing for Moon-soo's future relationships. On another occasion, Kang-do meets with Moon-soo to acknowledge and accept her decision to break up. However, he expresses his desire to continue working together on the project to build a memorial. While they work side by side, Kang-do tries his best to maintain a sense of normalcy, even though he yearns to be closer to Moon-soo. In response, Moon-soo deliberately keeps her distance and treats him coldly. When Kang-do remains at home, his health continues to deteriorate, leaving him weaker each day. Recognizing the severity of his condition, Jae-young takes her older brother to the hospital for a thorough examination. The results reveal that Kang-do's liver is damaged, and he urgently requires a transplant. Jae-young breaks down in tears, vowing to do whatever it takes to cure her brother. Deep down, Kang-do feels a profound sadness about his uncertain future. Despite this, he chooses to keep his illness a secret from Moon-soo and the others, not wanting them to worry. In an effort to mask his pain, Kang-do suggests to Moon-soo that they accelerate the construction of the memorial monument. Moon-soo, unaware of Kang-do's condition, is not suspicious and agrees to work diligently on the project. The next day, Kang-do stubbornly refuses to return to the hospital for further treatment. He believes he is fine and is determined to go back and finish his work with Moon-soo. However, upon arriving at Moon-soo's house, Kang-do suddenly collapses, causing Moon-soo to rush him to the hospital without hesitation. When Kang-do regains consciousness, he finds Sang-man by his side, but he immediately searches for Moon-soo, who seems to be avoiding him. Meanwhile, Moon-soo meets with Jae-young to discuss the possibility of being a donor for Kang-do. However, Jae-young informs her that Moon-soo is not a suitable match due to her lighter weight compared to Kang-do. Despite this setback, Jae-young is deeply moved by Moon-soo's willingness to sacrifice for her brother. While Kang-do falls back asleep, Moon-soo remains by his side. She then encounters Wonjin, who shares in her sadness over the uncertain future of her relationship with Kang-do. They both understand that they must prepare themselves for the possibility of losing him. In the scene back to the hospital, Kang-do visits Jae-young in her room, overwhelmed by a deep sadness for not being the supportive brother he wanted to be after their father's passing. Filled with regret, he quietly leaves the hospital and heads towards the place where Moon-soo is working on the final touches of the memorial monument design. As he arrives, Moon-soo shares a heartwarming message from Dong-young's colleagues, commending Kang-do as a skilled and dedicated foreman during their early days of working together. A wave of relief washes over Kang-do as he realizes that he had been carrying the weight of negative perceptions and unfairly blaming his father all this time. They then meet with Yoo-jin and Joo-won to discuss the possibility of using the remains of the building that was destroyed 10 years ago as part of the memorial. Initially, Yoo-jin and Joo-won express their concerns about potentially traumatizing the families of the victims. However, Kang-do and Moon-soo assure them that incorporating the remaining structure is the most fitting choice and aligns with the purpose of creating the memorial monument. Yoo-jin becomes visibly worried when she notices Kang-do's pale complexion, but he insists that he's fine and bids them farewell. Later on, Joo-won hands Yoo-jin a project file from 10 years ago, as he aims to clear his father's name despite the potential backlash from Yoo-tak. Outside, Moon-soo approaches Yoo-jin and hands her Dong-young's notebook, which reveals issues with the construction project of the mall that was ignored and covered up by Yoo-jin's father during his tenure as the company's head. At the hospital, Jae-young receives information from her senior that there are many people willing to be generous donors for Kang-do, and Sang-man is found to be a suitable candidate. In-suk, who learns about this, feels saddened as she worries about her son's well-being, as he intends to donate his heart. Similarly, Kang-do refuses to accept Sang-man as his donor. After some time, Sang-man isolates himself due to In-suk's disapproval of his intentions. Eventually, In-suk's heart softens, and she grants permission for her son to become Kang-do's donor. She also visits Suk-hee's drugstore and implores Kang-do to go home and live well in order to ensure Sang-man's safety. In the meantime, after In-suk leaves, Moon-soo arrives to see Kang-do and apologizes, mentioning that there are many people who care about him and that he should undergo a transplant surgery to live a long life. Meanwhile, an investigation into the tragedy that occurred 10 years ago is conducted, and Yoo-jin is appointed to replace Yoo-tak, who had handled their father's rescue efforts improperly. Yoo-jin then apologizes to Kang-do and clears Dong-young of any blame for the incident. Kang-do then goes to the hospital to see Jae-young, but unintentionally overhears her conversation with the expert doctor regarding the risks associated with Sang-man's surgery. Concerned for Sang-man's safety, Kang-do asks Jae-young to cancel the operation. The next day, Kang-do invites Moon-soo to spend the day together, but he suddenly faints while in her arms. A few months later, Joo-won decides to pursue his dream of renovating his father's cafe. During the process, he meets a talented architect who will handle the renovation project, while Yoo-tak, who has resigned from his position, pays a visit to Marie. He expresses his happiness after his divorce and feels free to pursue a closer relationship with her. On the other hand, Moon-soo is overjoyed to see Dong-chul back to work as a driver, and Yoon-ok is undergoing alcohol rehabilitation. During a visit to her mother, Yoon-ok inquires about Kang-do, which triggers a sudden realization for Moon-soo. Panicked, she rushes to the hospital where Kang-do undergoes a successful surgery and receives a liver transplant from Sang-man. Both Kang-do and Sang-man recover well from the operation. Now that Kang-do is healthy again, he starts studying civil engineering, and Sang-man assists Jae-young in running Suk-hee's traditional medicine shop. Moon-soo and Kang-do reignite their relationship and work together to fulfill their dream of opening an ice cream parlor, symbolizing their cherished memories. In the final scenes of the series, Kang-do and Moon-soo find joy in each other's company, gazing at the cityscape from the rooftop of Kang-do's house. The moral of the story is that do not forget to bring snacks for unexpected nosebleeds, and if you want a successful relationship, make sure to include street food and rooftop views in your romantic endeavors.